All right, so committee has a matter to discuss involving employment HR issues. So I want to take a say 10-minute executive session, and then we'll be back at that stage. Okay. Sure. So can you go ahead and mute the mics, and Chambliss, Mayhew, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking. It's my third member of the committee on. Oh, Lewis is not online. He's not going to be here this week. That's right.
Country. But to let other people off the hook, we could probably fill the other stuff pretty quickly and then do that before we take up the other.
Well, I already did it. Fine. So what's it's not on there. All right. Thank you all for that. We're back in a regular session. So let's go. Mr. Chambliss, if you'll note attendance, Mr. Washington is not in the attendance, but unless there are objections, he is excused as prior notifying us, and having a family vacation is a good reason. All right, let's go to agenda approval. Any alterations in regards to the agenda?
None.
All right. So there are no objections to the agenda. We will proceed as approved. No idea what that is. All right. With that, we'll proceed on to the minutes. Approval of the minutes of August 22nd, 2023. Chair has no comments or revisions. Do you have any, sir?
I have one requested revision. Could you pop those up for us on the screen? Just scroll down a tad, a little bit more. There. Okay, stop there. Yeah, under agenda bills, item number 3, I'd like to strike the word brief. And just generally, I think we should avoid characterizing discussions in minutes. We should, discussion followed, brief, spirited, any kind of adjective describing, I think is not helpful and could be misunderstood. Raises the question, why was it brief? Let's just say discussion followed, and generally let's ask that be done on all minutes.
Okay. Will you relay that to city clerk?
Yeah, she's online.
Oh, okay.
Can we just maybe double check with city clerk if that's okay with her?
Tina?
Well, I mean, I think it differentiates between a long discussion versus a brief discussion, but I'm happy to do whatever the committee would like.
Yeah, so that's the exact.
Well, wait, whoa. It wasn't, just remove the word brief. It's just discussion followed, not long, short, yellow, blue, or whatever. Discussion followed. I think that was
That's all.
Mayhew's request.
Yeah.
And the real issue is trying to not characterize the brief discussion, just to say it occurred. Is that okay?
It's been noted. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Why can't I? Okay, let's move on to agenda bill. Let's go on. So consideration of claims.
What? So minutes are approved with that.
Minutes change. Are approved with that change. Now consideration of claims approval report dated September 11th, 2023. Chair has no comments or revisions. Do you have any questions in regards?
Yeah, just I have one question and then I have one comment. My question is, at one point, some number of, over the last couple of years, we've had quite a few discussions in this committee about moving the claims and warrants report and making it, instead of an attachment to an agenda bill, or attachment to the agenda for this committee meeting, to instead just having it have its own home on the website, like most cities do, where we just post it there. And then that way it's easily accessible to all council members as well as members of the public. It's just a place on the website as opposed to having to go find it as an attachment to minutes. So I think that that's something that sort of there was various things that would happen over time that would make that more to make that easier to do. So we were waiting for that to happen. But I just want to check in. My question is that still sort of on the horizon, and kind of what's the status of moving down that path and timing, maybe, if assuming we're still moving on that path?
Director Ferguson has her hand raised.
You have to call on her if she can speak.
Oh, yeah. Can you open the mic for Director Ferguson?
I believe you can hear me. If not, please let me know. Good evening, F&A committee members. Great question. The timing of that change for having the claims report as a link on the website is connected to our Munis implementation or go live. And so we have just in August, we've completed the soft go live. And so staff has been working on a customized report that will be sufficient to have better data. We've talked, like Councilmember Mayhew has indicated, about format and the important information that council needs. And so that is still on track. We will be, bringing that new claims report to F&A as soon as staff has had a chance to do some testing. So we are on track with that, and our goal will be, just as Councilmember Mayhew indicated, in that it would be a link so that the packets are not 500 pages long. And so we realize that is a challenge. We'll also then, we've talked very briefly about interactive open data portals, and that would be also something further down the road that we're excited to bring forward, would be what's called an open checkbook, so that if someone did want to do a deeper dive into a payment that the city has made, they'd be able to do that through this, again, the city's website, but also using the Munis Socrata tools to do so. So a great question, good timing, and it is actually coming fairly soon after our go live. Thank you.
Councilor Mayhew?
Thank you for that answer. That's fantastic news, and sounds great. My one other comment is, and I have a few instances of this, but just in sort of thinking about how other council members could use it, use the report that we currently have, members of the public, other council members, me, I think if we go back a few years, there were a lot of discussions about the descriptions being very generic. And so there's been a lot of movement on those. When you look at these line item descriptions, they really do give a lot of information now, generally speaking. But there's one instance, one instance, not the word I want, one type of description, which is still happening, that it's the only one that I found where I've sort of stumbled. And it's, I think if we could find a way to have this remove this description, not worried about this particular report, I'm talking about generally going forward, and use a more descriptive description, I think that would really help. So let me give an example of that. I'm on page 18 of the agenda packet. Sorry, the agenda, packet, I guess that's what this is called. And on page 18, there is a payee, DESWES-Design West Engineering. And the description, so this is for $8,400. The description is professional services ending July 27th, 23. That's it. So there's really no idea of professional service, what kind of professional services is related to a project. I can guess from the name of the vendor that this has something to do with some capital projects or perhaps Parks and Public Works, but I'm guessing, I just don't know. So if this just had a little bit more to tell us what what kind of project it related to. So professional services ending 7/27/23 related to parks design, street, pavement quality, whatever, just adding a few words to just tell us what that related to. So there's a similar example on page 30 of the packet. This is for vendor parametrics. And there's a whole bunch of line items, all of which have titles, professional services ending on a date. But there's a bunch of line items and they go to different accounts, which suggests to me that they're for various different projects. And we use parametrics for a number of different projects. So there's really no way for me as a reviewer, or I think for a citizen trying to look this over, or any other council member to know what that relates to. And so if we, again, if it's the same fix, if we just put a little more in there, it doesn't have to be a lot more. I know the accountants can probably figure it out because they know what that account number, what project that is, but that's not something. So I could give you a few more examples. So that was parametrics. There's Purcell PNC LLC, same issue, page 35, 36. Then, another example on page 38, which is the Driftmeyer Architects. So just perhaps wherever we're using professional services, if we could just put a little more in there, then that would save us having to ask, what does this relate to?
Noted. We will ensure that those changes are made and provide that detail. One of the customizations in the report that we've been working to include is to have a project, a code, but a code that is meaningful to the council and to the public for understanding who we're paying and why. So thank you for that feedback, and we'll continue to work on making improvements.
So great, thank you. And Chair, with that in mind, I have no objections or further questions about the claims report.
All right. With those future improvements in mind, though, we'll proceed forward with this claims report and bring it into the next available council meeting for
Yes.
final approval. Okay. All right. We have no F&A agenda bills. We do have discussions. Q2 2023 financial report.
Good evening, Jana Walker, Budget Analyst, here to present that report. Okay. So we have the same basic format as we had before, so I'll just kind of glide through the things that aren't really changing. General fund revenues and expenditures appear to be on target. Special revenue funds are below target, partially due to police services payments from North Bend. And then also we added home elevation revenues, which we have not received yet and will not be spent until they are received. Utility fund revenues have improved from Q1, but they're still slightly below target. However, as of today, we received 74.5% of budgeted revenues, so they are year to date is ahead of schedule. And then there is no change to the general facility charges that we discussed for Q1. We've budgeted to receive 3.2 million. We haven't received any, but we are certainly expecting some from the tribe. And we move on to our city fund scorecard. You can see a lot of green thumbs up. We have the gray thumbs up for revenue compared to budget for special revenue funds. We have a currently a negative revenue variance for that. I think we're forecasting that we would receive about 30% of the revenues, but that is primarily because there's a really hefty revenue with home elevation funds, 1.5 million in our special revenue funds. So that makes the revenues appear much lower. It's not something we're worried about. Those funds are spent only as they're received, and nothing operational in there is what I would say. Utility funds forecast is currently at 98%. It's up from 96%, and that'll continue going up for the third quarter. And we have some detail here for general fund forecast. You can see total revenues were at about 104% is the forecast of what we originally estimated we would receive. And expenditures are 98% of the total amount we've appropriated. Special revenues, you can see there's that 30% receive is the forecast. That could certainly change. It probably will change with respect to many of these. But the spending will be held in check based on what we do actually receive. Utility funds forecast. We've discussed that. Internal service funds forecast. And then here we are at the reserve balances. General fund reserve should be 15 to 20% of the fund's expenditures. If you've studied Q1, you might notice that there's a big gap between what we forecasted then and what we forecasted now. That's actually an error. In Q1, I put the actual balance of reserves instead of the forecasted. So that's updated here. And you can see we're forecasted to be about $1 million ahead of the high side of our reserve for target. This next chart, non-utility capital fund, is based on the target reserve is based on 125% of our required debt payments. And we've adjusted this graph to show the actual spending and the forecasted spending that will occur. So you'll see that is the blue shaded area, and they're stacked charts. So the actual spending occurs after the target reserve. And you can see we're forecasted to spend about, is that 11 million by the end of this year. And we'll see if that comes to pass, but you can see that we're definitely spending down some of those reserves that we have on intentional city capital improvement projects. Next, we have the utility operating fund. Reserve should include about 90 days of operating expenditures, and you can see that we're above our target reserve, but we're heading closer to it, which is the goal for these reserves. We don't just want to save money infinitely. We want to save the right amount for the city. Utility capital fund reserves are more complicated. They are based on the utility rate study, which recommends that we save about 1% of the net value of utility capital assets as part of our target reserve. And then it also includes the debt service payments, 125% of an annual debt payment. And then you can also see stacked on top of that is our actual project expenditures, and then the forecasted for 2023. So you can see that we're consistently using, I should say, that reserve balance that we have for the utility capital fund. And then on to current fund balances. They've improved a lot since the Q1 report, and that's very typical because some of the revenues that we receive are very cyclical. In general funds, we're seeing that particularly for property taxes, which are received in bulk twice a year.
Right.
General funds did go down, however, that is caused by a payment that transfers that we've made out of, sorry, I'm just absolutely drawing a blank.
On the ISF, is that the transfer out of the internal service fund?
No, that shouldn't be the internal service fund, but it's out of our non-departmental plan transfers.
Right.
And then we also have special revenue funds, and that is lower almost entirely due to what's occurred in ARPA funds. And those are transfers into the general fund. And you can see capital project funds are up, utility funds are up, and internal service funds have gone down a little bit, but unremarkably so. Looking forward, we have some big things that are ongoing. Design work for the community center continues. We will have completed the Snoqualmie Parkway project very soon. Construction of water reclamation facility phase 3 is commencing or will commence. Similarly with the construction of the splash pad. And then finally, union negotiation completion, hopefully, or progress. I guess we'll see what happens. And then the appendix of this report is the budget status report actuals, which is a lot of numbers, and you should have those so you can look up closer. And then also some CIP forecast for non-utilities and utilities. And those haven't really changed very much from last time, maybe $200,000 worth of change overall. So continuing with what we saw in Q1. And with that, are there any questions that you have on this Q2 report?
I have none. Do you have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, I have several, like three-ish things to bring up. First off, just once again, what a fantastic report.
Excellent report.
This is so useful. I'm just thrilled. So thank you. I think the changes you made adding in the target reserves. This is new, like what you've done, showing the reserve ranges and that's what we talked about, but and said, look, let's not hold up Q1, but let's do, so it's just fantastic what you've done. I find it so useful, and I think others should as well. So knock wood, right? But great job. So there's only one thought I have on something that I think might be helpful, because non-accountants, I think, have a hard time tracking this, but let me see if I'm correct that I know what I'm talking about, which is on page 5 of the report, which is the internal service funds forecast.
Yes.
There she is.
So am I correct that if I look at Fund 401, we're showing 105%, but I think that maybe we're showing if I'm correct, we're taking some of the fund balance here and we're transferring it to a capital fund.
For
And
ER&R,
yeah, is that?
I don't believe that there's a transfer there.
Oh, okay.
What my guess is, and I haven't delved into this, is that we front loaded maybe some purchases for vehicles.
Okay.
So the forecast looks a little higher. If it continued on that progress, maybe we'd be over, but it's certainly something that we monitor on several levels. So
Okay. So this isn't a transfer citing. This is just the sort of the run rate, if you will, for the expenditures, right?
this is a forecast.
Okay. So yeah, ER&R, we tend to do the, like you said, the cars. There's some things we tend to do in chunks so that
It could be
sort of-
that.
yeah.
I can look into it deeper if you want me to.
Just to make sure, because I think anytime I see something, heading over budget, I just want to do a gut check and make sure, is that real or we're okay? It's just
Right.
timing, right?
Well, we're certainly not over budget, not over appropriation. This is just based on the historical rate at which we spend, and the current actual is the forecast. So could there be trouble? Possibly. Do we look for that all the time? Yes.
Yeah.
So I can certainly follow up.
Maybe
with you
just
there.
help us just
Okay.
tune in on that, because I think for the reason I suspect you're alluding is, if we wait till if there's a problem and we wait till it manifests, it's too late to do anything about it. It happened. It's in the rear view mirror. So the time is before, and that's why this report is so fantastic, is it's got us looking out at where we expect to be. And so then the question is, well, if we think we're going to be over, then now's the time to do something about it, so we don't end up at that place. Whereas it's just a timing thing. It's okay. We don't need to worry. There's no action required, right? So if you could just sort of double check for us.
Certainly.
All right, thanks. So that's that one.
Let me understand though, what your fourth quarter forecast is, in this case, looking at the prior 3 quarters, dividing by 3 and saying, I'm going to spend that in fourth quarter, add it to that amount, and that's my new projection.
Well, it's 2 quarters. And
right.
we've experimented with different methods, and that was my first one actually, and it just did some wild things. So what we have done is based it on how much of the budget have we spent in the past 3 to 5 years at this point in the year? How much have we spent at this point in the year? How much have we spent at this point of the year? And we've applied that to the budget based on the remaining portion of the year and added that to the actual spend.
So, but in the case of fleet though, don't we have a plan of purchases we intend to do? So we can actually put in plan forecast versus
Calculated.
calculated forecast.
Yeah.
I guess to me, the planned forecast would be the budget. That's what we're planning on meeting. And then we're forecasting based on what's occurred and what has occurred historically.
Okay.
But we certainly, I mean, as a city, we try to monitor this monthly. We're sending out reports to department heads and they review this and they're aware of where they might be ahead or where their expenses are compared to what they're allotted. And I think pretty frequently you will hear us coming to you for an amendment if there is an issue. I don't think that there's an issue in here, but I certainly am going to delve into it and just see.
Okay, my only,
what's going
I
on.
mean, like utilities has a monthly run rate that's, you can average it out and make a projection that way. Fleet is somewhat different with discrete purchases that occur at different times that may skew the numbers one way or the other, and it may be better in that case to actually look at the planned purchases for forecast, but I'll leave that to you. If this drives you to actually go do the explanation, hey, I'm all for it. Mr. Chambliss, you have
Well, one of the difficulties we're having with fleet is actually getting the vehicles, so we never know when they're gonna show up. So things are hitting the number, them out of the blue. You know, we ordered a tree truck 3 years ago. It's still not here.
Councilor Mays?
Yeah, so if I could just, so setting aside capital funds, not talking about those right now in my comment I'm about to make. I'm not talking about, in this comment, I'm not talking about, utility funds. I'm solely talking about operating funds, which includes the internal service funds, right?
Mhm.
In the past, for many years, certainly the 6 years I've been on the council, what's been true is that if we overspent, we generally had the ability to cover some amount of that out of various sources. So someone could come to us and say, hey, we overspent. Can you please increase the appropriation for us to cover that? I don't believe we can do that this year. I believe that we actually don't have the money. So there may be, what I'm worried about, and the sort of the reason I'm sort of poking at this, is that there may be an expectation that that could happen when this year the answer may be no. And the reason the answer may be no is, you know, we're in, let me just choose my words carefully. We don't know what our union, we have all of our union contracts under discussion. So we don't know how those will end. But what we do know is what generally is being asked by such unions for raises. And when we look at our budget, we don't have it. We just don't have it. So if we're in a situation where everything we have may get used in that direction, we may not have the money for helping any other over budget. We simply may not have the money. So that's why I'm kind of more focused on, hey, we better spot this coming when we can actually say, buy one less vehicle this year or something like that. No, I'm not saying that we would say that. I hope that isn't the quote out of this, because that's not what I meant. I meant to say there's actions we can take. And rather than just saying, hey, let's increase the budget, this year we may have to say, actually, we need to change the spend pattern. So that's, yeah, maybe that helps a little color of why I'm just a little worried about this.
I absolutely agree. I think that's the best way to handle things. We shouldn't be spending beyond any of our appropriation without
Way up front, right?
way up front.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay. And but your comments actually, I certainly took note of the fact that, which I already knew, but I appreciate your comments. Hey, finance is watching this every month. We're saying our reports, we're talking, this is all, you know, a whole management thing that's going on. So, and of course it is, and fantastic to hear that. So just help us kind of tune in at the high level I think that one sort of caught my eye.
And on that particular one, I'll just point out that the actual is currently less than 50% of the amended budget for 2023. So it is something funny could have happened in 2020.
Yeah.
To skew some of our numbers. So it's 105% doesn't necessarily mean danger.
As I recall, we used to buy the vehicles. No, let me say it differently. There was a year where I remember us buying the vehicles way later in the year than we normally did, because we kind of got hung up in some discussions about what to buy. So it may be that there were some timing things. But anyway, with that particular fund, I do think maybe the fastest way out of Dodge is what Councilmember Holloway was suggesting, which is just go to the fleet guy and say, hey, what's your plan?
Okay.
Where are we at? As opposed to extrapolating from the past, just say, because he's got he knows what every one of those dollars are. Say, what's your plan? Are we okay or what? And how much do you think we're really going to spend in the second half? Yeah. Your call though.
Okay.
All right. So that's that one. The two other topics, which I just think it's fantastic that this report brings them out so well. The two other topics, the first is, and you touched on this, is the rate study. So when I look at, if you could just bring up the slide on utility operating funds. This is exactly what I'm worried about here. And what I'm worried is that in this budget, so let me go back. The last time we did a rate study, that rate study projected a certain capital spending by project and by time period. And then it projected operating expenses by time period and had some inflation factors in there. And using that, we came up with a rate study that would then fund that. This budget cycle, we moved a significant additional amount of cost into the utility funds. I think it was at least 2 FTEs, a lot more spending on trees and
Stormwater.
yeah. And so at the time, we knew we were doing that. We talked about it at council.
Right.
And the discussion was, okay, well, we better get on a rate study then, because we definitely think we should make these expenditures, but we're going to have to adjust the rates to pay for that. So that was, we knew what we were doing, but therefore I'm now worried about, hey, we're getting late in the year. Rates need to be decided on now so they can take effect January 1st. And so I'm just worried about where we're at on the rate study, because believe it or not, the month's name is September. I know, I don't know how that happened, but so I'm just curious, do we have that rolling yet? And if you don't know the answer tonight, that's fine, but I just think we need to have that rolling and finish soon, within a few months.
Director Ferguson has her hand raised.
Aha.
With regards to the utility rate study, we have produced an RFP to solicit proposals from potential consultants who might provide that. One of the things that we're learning is that, obviously timing is of the essence. The proposals are due September 15th. We have a very defined review process for those proposals, and then we would be bringing those to the F&A committee with regards to who or what vendor, what consultant has provided the best proposal. And then we would look to have them begin the project as soon as possible. I did a little digging in the history of rate study discussions. And it's my understanding that there were many committee meetings, both the Park and Public Works Committee as well as the F&A Committee. We have asked responders to the RFP to add in additional discussions with the council so that we have a very comprehensive and the proper amount of discussion with the council on the rate study, but nonetheless that is moving forward, and we should be having that conversation about who is going to be providing the rate study very, very soon.
So one caveat to that, that should first go to Public Works, Parks and Public Works, and then come to F&A.
We will plan for that in the schedule. Once we are getting to a scope of work, we'll plan for that, and all of those meetings with the Parks and Public Works will start first. Thank you.
No, wait, a misunderstanding. So the results of the RFP go to Parks and Public Works and then come to F&A.
Understood.
Same night. No big deal. Just rates and stuff are the domain of Parks and Public Works.
Understood. Thank you.
You had,
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. And just, you are still in Parks and Public Works. So, one thing you may find, Director Ferguson, is, with, Councilmember Holloway's got a lot of experience going through these, and I think that, you know, the particular rate study this time, and the components of, is that something that will rely on the consultant and staff to, you know, take us through, but the process generally, and helping especially new council members sort of get tuned into that and move through it relatively quickly is something I think you can really lean on both Councilmember Holloway and myself to help with. And so, you know, please do that. Just helping them understand the process so that when you guys bring it to it, you have less time just people not knowing what the heck you're talking about, and more time just spent on, okay, let's get through what you're presenting. So let us know how we can help.
Will do. I have built in, you know, in with those who are going to be responding to the RFPs. They do know that there are new council members. So they're going to be including some utility rate study 101, but the Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and yourself will definitely be a help with working through the rate study. And you know, this is something, rate studies have been part of my experiences for 25 years. So we're hopeful, and with your expertise, that we'll be able to, you know, move through this utility rate study and get folks up to speed as best that we can.
My second item?
your second item?
All right, my
Well, that was
second,
your second item. This is your third.
well, the second item had two parts. So there's three items. Yeah, I did say that. So the other one is sort of similar, is what we've talked about now also for a few years, is re-looking at how our internal service fund charge outs are working. And we've had, so just by way of background, right? Remember that one of the largest charges every single department receives is actually their internal service fund charge outs, which is always difficult for those department heads. I don't know, I'm not speaking of Snoqualmie in particular, but generally, because that's something that then seems a little bit opaque to them. It's like, wait a minute, I'm getting a charge that's based on some other thing, and how did you decide? And, you know, it's just a more complex thing than everything else that each department manager manages. It's also harder for us on the council to track what's going on, but there has been a feeling that perhaps our internal service fund charge outs are have not changed over time, even though the components of the cost pools have, and that maybe, you know, we need to relook at that to make sure that we're not overcharging some departments and undercharging others, and that there's at least some indication that we may be somewhat off on that. And so the challenge had been finding time to get someone to focus on that. So luckily, I know that you guys are now overstaffed in the department, so you have tons of time to do things like that. But yeah, in all seriousness,
Sarcasm sign out. All
yeah,
right.
sarcasm aside, in all seriousness, I do think that that's something that is important to sort of get to. And with the successful, what I consider to be fantastically successful completion of this quarterly report design and rollout, if that's something that could get on the agenda to get relooked at, and maybe you do it fund by fund as opposed to all of them at once. But anyway, if that's something that could get on the agenda, or the, not our agenda, but the work agenda, that would be really great. I think that would be really helpful.
I think Jen can address that now. We've discussed that a little bit.
Thank, oh,
Jen's
thank
got her.
you.
hand up. Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You're hitting all of the topics. You're hitting all of our work plan items. So this is good. So Janet and I have talked about the status of the cost allocation plan update. Our prior budget manager Jana had started with looking at those internal service fund charges. And so, yes, this is on our work plan. One of our challenges that you pointed out is obviously staffing capacity resources, and certainly having a quarterly report kind of checked off that, you know, that we could get into, you know, consistency and standard reporting that's meaningful. So we're continuing to move through our work plan items. Cost allocation plan, again, is something that we are taking a look at, and what we may need to address is, you know, bringing in assistance, perhaps a consultants to help with that, because we do know that methodologies are out of date. We do know that the charges that are applied to the direct service departments are hard to understand. Are they fair? And so we want to ensure that we have got the best cost allocation plan updated appropriately. So this is on our work plan, and we are teeing up to, you know, spend some priority time on that particular issue. Thank you.
Sorry, this is not rocket science, so I'm having difficulties with a consultant in regards to that, but okay.
Yep. For
Our staffing capacity has been depleted, but again, Jana and I are going to be looking at where we're at with that in-house review of the cost allocation plan. So that's what we will be noting, where we may have some challenges, but again, continue to move forward with updating the overall cost allocations.
So just for what it's worth, I did spend an entire career doing this sort of thing in cost allocation plans. I've seen so many, I can't even remember how many, but you're right. I would say this: if you're doing a cost allocation plan for a federal contractor, it's ridiculously complex. Nobody, well, maybe Boeing, I don't know, almost nobody does that in-house. Almost everybody uses consultants for that. Okay, that's much more complex than what we need. Having said that, though, most companies that I've been involved with, even with simple cost allocation plans, ours is not the simplest, certainly not the most complex that I've seen, but it's not, I've seen simpler. So, but at least getting some guidance from, so maybe a lot of the work's done in-house, but still a lot of guidance or help from outside contractors, I would just say in my experience, is common. So it didn't surprise me that I heard that in Ms. Ferguson's comments. That is something that people, you know, look to consultants to help guide.
This is not a large organization. We should know what the service costs and what basis of allocation we're using, and it's math from there. But I'll stand by to be educated. I'll just voice my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, into back, are we prepared for a legislative priorities discussion?
I have a few comments, but I don't know if we should take them up, or I know that we're looking at a round table on this topic. I think I peeked ahead to draft itinerary, and I think we're thinking about a whole council roundtable on this, perhaps on the 25th. I'm happy to talk about the thoughts I have now, if that would be helpful. I'm also willing to wait, you know, whatever you think would be most useful.
Well,
My comments, I probably just spent more time doing that
Yeah.
than just giving the comments.
go ahead. Real quick.
Okay. So highest priorities, community center expansion, great. The public safety, there's two categories under public safety. So we're working off of last year's priorities. The legislature did make changes in these areas. I would find it very useful, and suspect other council members would as well, to get a briefing from our police chief on his perspective of, did that solve the concerns that we were experiencing here in Snoqualmie? Did it only partially address, and sort of get more educated as to, what might we still see as a concern here that we might ask for? Because I think as written, I think things changed since then. Let's figure out kind of where we're at.
Right.
But I think we need a briefing to really know that. So maybe that's something that we could ask to have done, to help counsel through this. Housing affordability. Well, let me jump down. Under other priorities, we have Snoqualmie Parkway. I think in about another 2 days, we might be able to take that off the list.
It'll
looking
be
pretty
30 before
promising.
we can paint it, but it'll be paved in one.
So I suspect Snoqualmie Parkway would come off of there. Under the increased revenue options, we might want to say a little bit more, or maybe not. It seemed kind of brief. I wasn't sure what we meant by REIT authority and flexibility. I can guess, but maybe we want to be a little more specific, or maybe we don't. So, but maybe those could be sort of fleshed out a little. But then the only other thing I thought, I'm going to try and make a point, see if this takes with you. I thought, well, why don't we put strong military defense on here?
Why?
Well, the reason we don't put that on is that's not something that we deal with at
Right.
city council. So we have this thing, housing affordability. And it really appears to me to be focused at the state level. And housing affordability across the state is a huge issue. But the way we wrote this, we didn't make it ours. So I think housing affordability is a big issue in Snoqualmie, but it's very different than how that issue manifests in other communities. So I think if we're going to have housing affordability on there, it ought to be something that's much more specific to what we need in Snoqualmie.
Well, and that was our housing needs analysis that we approved and said, go forward with. We ought to hear back on that.
Yeah. So I'd like to see, in summary, community center expansion, stay on, public safety, either come off or be modified to where we see ongoing issues that we want to ask for help on. Housing affordability should be more specific. Snoqualmie Parkway, I think, can come off. And then we might want to just be a bit more specific under increased revenue options. I didn't, and I was just kidding about adding strong military defense. I was just trying to illustrate a point. So there's really nothing else that I suggest we add.
Okay. I was just picturing Mr. Chambliss in khakis, but all right.
Yes, sight.
And with that, we'll talk on that on the 25th and proceed forward further on that. I don't propose you and I go further than what we just talked about. All right, and then get my glasses back and the rest, September to draft itinerary. So we've got that, which was the we're in concurrence. Let's do the workshop before council and then council afterwards, and may continue past if we need to. All right, and the rest of it is future conversations. With that, it's draft agenda for next Monday, but I believe we have a proposal.
Yes. So Chair, I've reviewed the proposed council meeting agenda, and it first off is very light. And secondly, it didn't seem that anything on that list was urgent. and couldn't wait another 2 weeks. And so I thought, rather than bringing in all the staff, all the support and all the council members, some of whom are, many of whom actually are going to be out of town. And so having to call in rather than, and the mayor's also out of town. I think you were going to chair the meeting
Yep.
in her absence, but with all of that in mind, and most importantly, that there's nothing on this agenda that I see that can't wait 2 weeks. My thought is, I propose that we cancel this council meeting and move these items to the 25th.
You've got a couple items up front, staffing concurrence, or have issue with that?
I was looking at it earlier today and I didn't see anything pressing. Officer Doucette is already at work. So we're not waiting on the swearing in for him to take that position. The appointment to the Civil Service Commission, that meeting got canceled. So no person there, or this month's meeting got canceled. The accreditation report can certainly go, the financial report can go. So yeah, concur.
Okay, but I'll remember this moment when later on you tell me we can't get to all the things. It's a missed opportunity somewhat. There's something we could have brought, but I'm willing to go ahead and hold off on council next week. Catherine will give me grief for not doing my duties, but that's all right.
We will make the appropriate notifications.
Okay.
I think it's well established what a slacker council member. Oh, wait, I don't want to impinge any particular council member's work ethic.
All right. With that, we have council agenda, which is we're not gonna have council next week. You took my agenda away.
I'm sorry.
Chair, I have a question.
You go
If
ahead.
nothing else, yeah. Chair, I have a question maybe for city clerk, which is, am I correct in believing that we would need to give a public notice that we're canceling the meeting, and just to verify that city clerk will handle all of that?
That's correct.
Okay. With that, we've covered the agenda for tonight. Unless there are other issues, we can go to adjournment. Hearing nobody stand up and seeing no hands in the audience virtually here, we are adjourned. Thank you all.